I um I was just crying actually, but I've thought about recording something like this a few times, and so I'm gonna go ahead and just do it. But um so the first 4 days that I was homeless, I didn't really have adequate um I had bought a men's pair of waterproof work boots and thinking keeping my feet, like I thought it would keep my feet warm enough, and it actually they actually didn't. But I wish with that money that I had, it was the last of my money, I wish that I had bought a sleeping bag, but I honestly hadn't thought about that. And I had never been homeless before. I mean, I've been homeless for about a year, but I've been living in efficiency hotel, so I've technically been homeless, but I had never slept outside before, except for camping. Very little camping. But so the first 4 days I only had a beautiful heirloom quality quilt that the city women get together and make, and it's not a good blanket to give to anybody who's going to be homeless, because it's cotton, and it doesn't wick moisture. And what ended up happening is, without rain or snow, just the cold was enough to make the blanket at least feel very wet. And I had a shower liner, and that's all I had, except for my boots, and my coat that they bought me was at Amazon. I'm sure it's fine for if you live in a house, but it's a puffer coat that's not very puffy, let's put it that way. A cheap puffer coat that's not real, not very puffy at all. And anyway, and I had bought layering things. I had actually 5 pairs of pants on, and I don't know how many shirts, 4 or 5 shirts of different warming materials. And I did find out after maybe the 3rd day that taking my jeans off, because they are cotton, they were somewhere in the middle, taking those off actually was warmer, even though it was less number of things. Well, the message basically I just wanted to share is, it's taken, I've only been homeless and living outside for 2 or 3 weeks, and my abusive ex hasn't been giving me anything regularly, but did put some money into my account recently, and so I'm in a hotel right now for a week. I was just thinking about, because I ended up getting decent frostbite on my toes and my fingers, and they still aren't right, and it looks scary sometimes. Even now that I'm in a warm hotel room, my toes, like last night I was looking at my feet, and they just almost look like my certain toes, they look dead. They look like white with a little bit of a tinge of blue. They just don't look okay. And I'm able to walk, and I knew that was like days after those first 4 days I didn't have what I needed, and I ended up going back to the family violence unit. It's not a shelter, and I basically begged them to please buy me a sleeping bag, and they did. And that's made a world of difference. I was thinking, and of course more up north would be a lot worse weather. But there was I ended up becoming homeless and living outside when there was like a severe at least for Virginia, a severe snowstorm coming. And so it was very, very cold. I think it got down to 13 degrees, is what someone had told me on the night that I really feel like I got these injuries. One thing I keep thinking about is just that, being homeless, not that I'm some expert, but when you're homeless, it's like that's a full-time job. Like, I've thought over and over, like, what if I had to, get up at a certain time to try to make it to a job, if one of these places would hire me when they realize that I don't, have a home and I'm living outside and, I'm not showering regularly. And so people don't want to hire you. They didn't even want to hire me when I'm living in a hotel and don't have a car and I can just walk somewhere. But, when you're cold, like, I've had food because of food stamps, and I'm very thankful for that. And I wouldn't have been on food stamps previous to this. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying it was a new thing for me. But I've been very thankful. I probably wouldn't be alive if I didn't have the food stamps. When you're cold, when you're dealing with, extremities becoming frostbitten, or just any level of cold that is, very uncomfortable. Like, and then to, like, not having anywhere to go. Like, it was the middle of the night and I'm outside and there's nowhere to go. Somewhere like Walmart that would have been open all the time was, I don't know how many miles away, but a lot, like 10 miles away. It wasn't like there was somewhere I could kind of just go and, kind of get rewarmed for a little while, and then go back out for however much longer. And it's really something. And I've cried over it many times, like, just in hopes that I'll be able to recover fully, because I definitely have, like, some nerve damage in my left foot, like on the top of my foot, further beyond the toes. It just does not feel right. And the color of my toes, like I said, I'm inside a hotel now that's warm, and the color of certain of my toes is just not. And then my fingers too. I think my toes were worse than my fingers, but my fingers, they're not right. And there's not really, I feel like they're swollen, but there's not really like a discoloring currently with my fingers. But there needs to be something more in place for people. And I don't think this is going to be my long term, but, like, I guess that's why people turn to drugs and alcohol if they're not already caught up in those things, because you're just so cold. And then if you were hungry as well, like, that would just be either of them. And I don't know much about being hungry. I've fasted before, but I've been hungry, but it hasn't been too long before. Like, I've been at the end of the month where I didn't have hardly anything left to eat and didn't have money to buy food, but I still had food. It might not have been what I wanted, or a lot of the same, but I don't know hardly anything about being hungry. And nobody was around because I was, like, outside in the woods alone. But if you could have seen me, I had probably on the second day, I realized that I needed to put the shower curtain, which was, plastic of some sort, right? But put that close to my body and put the quilt on the outside since the quilt was wet. And I was like, I had strung some rope through the grommets of the shower curtain and somehow attached the quilt to it the best I could, and kind of like cinched it at the top, so it kind of like made like a tent of some sort just over my body, and had basically had the two things cinched at the top. And I was so cold, and I was like on top of my duffel bag, so not to be on the ground, because it was snowing, like a light snow, at least some of that time, but my blanket was wet before the snow came, and it was just so windy and so cold, and it's like all you can do. And I could tell that my extremities, like my fingers and toes, were going numb, and I would sometimes I would wake and I would just like start like kind of pumping, like moving my fingers and toes and trying to get blood circulating back into them. And even after I got the sleeping bag, so that was after 4 days, it was still pretty extreme weather, and very thankful for the sleeping bag, and still cold, but not anything like I have been. But I remember I just read recently online, you should not rub if you had frostbite, but I was like trying to rub and massage my feet, and I was just like, it's funny because I've said I don't pray, but whenever maybe I pray, but I was like, please let my feet be okay. I want to be able to dance. I don't want to have anything cut off, and I think I want to pull myself together. I know there are people who do drugs and who just want money for drugs, or there's this part of me that's always been very hesitant to give anything to a homeless person that wasn't something they could eat. But I just feel like I'm a compassionate person overall, but I have not had the compassion that I should for people. And I know too, it's like, you can't save them all, you can't feed them all, you can't clothe them all. There's all these things you can think when you're in your warm car with your Starbucks coffee in your hand. Or maybe you even don't pick it up when you're at the light and they're right there, because you just spent $5 or $6, and yet you're not giving that to them. And without meaning to speak ill of anybody, even when dealing with the people who work for like the family violence unit, it's not a shelter, or other places and areas where the shelters have been full, they're just really, I know there's only but so much they can do, but yet those places, and everyone has their salary that they make, but people get turned away all the time. And I'm not trying to lay fault on anything, it just can feel like sometimes, and I haven't been in this situation very long, but it could just feel like there's a lack of compassion for people who are even in it to supposedly help those in need, that there's just a lack of compassion. Or the coat, and I told the lady I would have been happy for something from the thrift store, because often at the thrift store you can buy something secondhand that's a much better quality than what that money can buy you new. But when I had gone there to ask about the sleeping bag, like, she went out to warm up her car, and then she was putting on her coat, and I realized that her coat was an all-weather coat, like one my mom would have had, where, you know, you can unzip the lining, and it's just, you know, it's got lots of layers. It's very, very warm. And yet here I was in this thin Amazon, nothing wrong with Amazon, you know, but thin Amazon puffer coat. Like I said, it's not very puffy at all. Like, I don't know, it's probably $30 or $40 at the most, and it's probably not worth but $20. But excuse me, and I had bought, like, you know, a wool blend, 3 really thick socks. I wish they weren't so thick, because that's why I got size 11 men's shoe, which I certainly wish I hadn't, but I couldn't. I had gotten a 9 at first in men's, and I wear like a 9.5 in ladies, and I couldn't get my socks to fit. And this is before I had spent one night outside yet, so this was the last night before I was gonna have to sleep outside, and I was trying to figure, and so I ended up having to exchange the Walmart men's boots for a bigger size, and I just went ahead and went up 2 sizes, and now it's kind of almost like when you're roller skating and you just kind of have that funny feeling in your ankle, and it's just not a good fit. But anyway, even 3 pairs of these men's socks was not enough to stop, you know, me from getting frostbitten. And thankfully in this area, you know, that severe weather didn't stay, because I kept thinking of Canada or just anywhere up north where, you know, or somewhere that I've never been, but, you know, just thinking about these places that are so freezing, and then thinking of people being homeless in those places, and knowing that what I was dealing with was comparatively nothing, you know. And there's this whole part of all that we take for granted, and then there's definitely, like I am expressing today, like just, you know, all the times that they kind of flash to my mind of, you know, when I didn't do for someone else, and I maybe even thought bad of them, like, oh, they're just working that corner, they just want their money for this or that, you know. And I think there are people who are more like scam artists and aren't, you know, who knows, but I might not look homeless, you know. I might look homeless because I've heard the same thing for a week or more nowadays, but I might not look homeless compared to some people, or people might not realize right off, or I'm not holding the sign and just kind of standing at a corner, but it's definitely been a learning experience, and I've been living in a tree, and I've thought over and over, what would I do if I didn't have this tree? To at least, it doesn't cover me completely, but at least partially. And with the shower curtain, once I got the sleeping bag, I put the shower curtain as more of a tarp, to cover the opening. And the sleeping bag, the sleeping bag has saved my life, and I've thought to myself, every homeless person in the whole world needs a sleeping bag. Like, these quilts that these ladies make, they're beautiful, but, like, please put them on a bed somewhere where they don't belong on the ground, and they don't help with anybody who is out in the elements. But a sleeping bag, even though I've had to mend it a couple times and it's got stitches falling apart, it's not the greatest quality, but the batting and the materials have saved me from further, frostbite, and I don't know, just makes you think It just really makes you think. So I've paid for a week here, and I didn't have enough to pay for 2 weeks, but the money, I didn't want to spend all of it either. It sucks to feel like you can't, wash a load of laundry or do anything, like buy a cup of coffee or something that's not food stamp, permissible. But I've just placed, because of where I'm at and I don't have a car, placed an order on eBay and Amazon, but for some food and stuff, but for just, okay, what can I get to be warmer? What can I buy? Because I had bought, a warm pair of gloves, but they're the kind you can't do anything. You certainly can't scroll on your phone. You can't do anything. You really can't do anything. So I'm always taking them off. Like if I'm gonna make myself, get myself something to eat. It's funny how much I love iced coffee, and I think living in the tree and having freezing coffee that doesn't actually technically have any ice in it, is gonna make me turn away from ever wanting iced coffee. But everything's cold, it's nice at this time of year. At least, like, I have a refrigerator, so I can buy, I've bought some lunch meat. I wish it was better quality, but and had a tortilla, would make like a wrap, very simple wrap, no lettuce or all the good things I might want to put on there. And I've been shopping at a Dollar General, because the Walmart and the Food Line are just so many more miles away, so it would be more like an hour and a half walk to get there and then back. So I've been very glad for some of the what I mean is they're not maybe the healthiest of things, but I've been very glad for food. But everything's cold and I'm cold, and what can I buy? Just have more compassion. Just have more compassion. Because, I know I've seen people curled up here and there, like sitting on the ground and something around them, and I just feel like they're cold, they're homeless, they're probably hungry, but you're going home and you have everything you need. I don't know, it's just, and you can't take them home with you, right? I feel like there need to be some real, even with people leaving domestic abuse like myself, and being told all these years by so many people, strangers and quote friends, oh, well, you'll just go to a shelter. And then they actually thought I could take my kids and I would, but there's not room, and there hasn't been any room for me in any shelter. And all the people who give to shelters for abused women, I'm sure they're helping somebody, but there's so many people they're not helping because they're full. And when the shelters only have 7 beds, I would have needed every one of them for me and my 6 children. And that doesn't happen. People who have maybe at the most 2 kids can sometimes find a place at a domestic shelter. And the shelter I did stay at, I could only stay there for a month, but it was a homeless shelter. And now that I haven't been living at home and facing the sexual assault, and it's been months since I've lived at home, I don't qualify anymore to even try to be on like a wait list for a domestic abuse shelter. So there's a lot of red tape. And so now anywhere that I would try to find help, it has to be a homeless shelter because, but they just stay full. These shelters stay full. And that's another thing too. When people used to stand on the street and I would see, I would think to myself, if they really were homeless, if they really were in need, why wouldn't they just go to a shelter? And now I know, because the shelters, whether it's for domestic abuse or for homelessness, there's just not enough. And and then there's the whole side of kind of maybe losing some of your personal rights and kind of having someone wanting to micromanage you and those type of things. But laying all that aside, this has definitely been a learning experience, and